occasion of 39th World Heritage Day, SIAC presents a day-long virtual conference on complex pasts, diverse futures, as a part of MOM, Memoirs of Monuments. Hamari Kahani, Hamari Dharohar, where to deep dive into the collective memory of monuments as PEST, P-E-S-T, landscape. PEST is political, economic, socio-cultural, and technological.
So, in MOM, we invite Dr. Amit Ranjan Biswas, who is a deeply passionate and compassionate persona. Amit is a senior consultant, child and adolescent neuropsychiatrist, ex-honorary senior lecturer and trainer based in UK. He's also a multi-award winning film director, poet, playwright, transformational and thought leader, global and a TEDx inspirational speaker and an educator. Amit lectures extensively, facilitating workshops of a broad range of areas, including mental health, well-being and resilience, leadership, incorporating interdisciplinary ideas and practices from philosophy to psychology, contemplative traditions to neuroscience, co-creating a deep change in self and society.
We, along with Dr. Amit Ranjan Biswas, will embark on a journey through time and space, focusing on two monuments, Stonehenge and Sistine Chapel, and how Amesbury Archer, a Bronze Age man, is connected with Michelangelo, weaving stories of transformation and healing. The myths, magic, pilgrimage, astronomy, and burial rituals will connect with Florentine Renaissance, and communities come together in sacred spaces to create meaning, transcend the ordinary, and become bigger and greater than themselves. Amida, Dr. Amit Ranjan Biswas, we welcome you, and we are very honored and very elated to have you with us in Memoirs of Monuments, Hamari Kahani, Hamari Dharohar.
Thank you, Priyanka. I'm deeply privileged and honored to be here with an extraordinary organization celebrating monuments on 18th of April. Today, we're sharing some ideas and thoughts about monuments that heal and transform. And I thought I will create a journey as a modern 21st century human being, connecting somebody from Bronze Age, an Amesbury Archer, to a Florentine Renaissance man born in 1475, Michelangelo Buonarroti, and how they're connected in the spaces of healing, how they're connected time and space and beyond. So let's go back 2400 BC, exactly 2440 BC, almost 5,000 years ago. Amesbury Archer, a man who is found in Salisbury Plain, just about 3 miles south of Stonehenge. And it was a sudden found by modern man. If we show a little bit of a picture that in Amesbury Archer lying in his burial mound, an individual burial mound, where we found while we are making a modern Amesbury primary school. And we've been suddenly very excited, and we kind of dig the whole night with the lights of even a car, digging up bits and pieces from this man coming into life after 4,000 years. Let me give you a little bit of a story around what's happening at that time. This is a time of great change in Great Britain, in this little island we see today, a cultural shift from Neolithic age and Stone Age to Bronze Age coming up. Migrations is happening. And as we see, this is a peaceful integration of people. It's not fights. We have social groups and complex formations of hierarchical slowly coming up. We are still tribal, but at the same time, we are moving on from a fortification, small spaces, more fertile ground. And we see our radiocarbon modern strontium dating has shown we have coming from Switzerland and Germany, further in Alps in Europe, and migrating from a cold but getting drier countries as weather's changing. We needed more wetlands, and we are coming to Great Britain to find new home. And in this new home, we have fertile valleys where livestock and farmers are beginning to have wheat, and we are having engineering tools coming up, tools like axe, and even my bow. I mean, I sometimes look like Robin Hood, but I'm not Robin Hood. Having that bow made from, not from UT anymore, not shorter bows, but longer. Even my arrows are very differently defined, more penetrating power, serrated edges, and having a transformation on technology. And the most important, we're gathering metals like copper and arsenic and tin from various places in Europe and in the world. And this is not, again, by invasion of cultures, but it was trade. A trade economy has started. First, metals are brought from abroad. And we know how to extract from a rock a metal through fire. And that is alchemy. Alchemy of transformation going on, not just in our outside world, but inner shift of our consciousness. A inner transformation of shift of alchemy is going on. We're becoming house proud. And avant-garde housing is coming up. This Amesbury Archer is living in an avant-garde house with wooden beds, animal skins on it, with cupboard and racks and stacked. We have a diet rich in meat, in pigs and cows. And more importantly, this archer loved beakers. What is a striped pottery with grooved wires? And later on, we called them a beaker culture in England. As we found this Amesbury Archer in his grave, if we show the next slides, that we saw him with a lot of his really wonder with this is the grave we have been digging and finding him out. Go to the next slide. We will see we have a lots of home things like copper knives, flint arrowheads, wrist protectors, beaker pots, and most importantly, moving on, I have been lying like this in my grave with bones, but coming up with the most important metal, gold. And there were gold earrings, and this is the first gold actually saw in Britain, and it's been traded, it's been made. This gentleman died of an abscess in his tooth, and there was some accident in his right knee. He died about age 45 compared to his early ancestors. But he needed to surround it by his home objects because home was Rome. If I talk about his ancestors, they're very proud. Or maybe before that, we can computer generated this Amesbury Archer's face, and you can see the man's face is no different from the man today. If you go to the next slide of computer generated figure. And then, not this one, and then to our ancestors. Yes, this is a possible figurehead of Amesbury Archer, the man with the bow, creating the Neolithic shift in the consciousness. An elite warrior, and been called later on by us the king of Stonehenge. If you go to the next slide, his ancestor. And this man is called Stonehenge Man. He's been found 3 kilometers west of Stonehenge. And again, radiocarbon dating shown us is originally from Swiss Alps. He's born in Wells, and there is also a migration story. His man was 3000 BC, about a few hundred years before this, 600 years almost before this Amesbury Archer. This man went back, born in Wells, moved back to Wiltshire age 2, went back Wells down and forth, and died in early 20s and 30s. But at the time, even in 3000 BC, Britain was not at a backwater in Neolithic age and waiting for Romans to come and show the civilization. Britain was not even primitive. It was a time for a renaissance, new thinking, time for great monuments. And you will know, great monuments was developed outside Britain, like monuments in Giza in 2500 BC, or 2000, the Palace of Knossos in Crete, or a lot after 300 BC Parthenon. Great monuments are built all over the times. But this is a site in Stonehenge, as in a beautiful site which awe-inspiring anyway, and has been frequented by people even for 10,000 years. People gathered and went there in 800, 8000 BC for a lot of reasons. Somehow we don't know, but we do know people are used for burials. We have seen many burials around Stonehenge, people with broken bones, with injuries. But this site has started great development of monuments around 3000 BC, where first 20-ton Sarsen megaliths were brought on Marlborough Downs, not very far in Salisbury Plain. And how did these people brought it there? It was a mystery. It was really difficult to know how. With modern equipments, it was hard to bring in there. We have some theories, and recent research has kind of shown they used wooden logs to drag, and it is possible to drag hundreds of miles. So 20 Sarsen stones from locally. But another set of stones were brought called blue stones. And this is the interesting one. A lot of people have said the blue stones have healing powers. They have some different energy and chemicals. The blue stones can be drummed. They're called ringing stones and sound sensitive. However, initially, if we go to the next slide, initially the Stonehenge had been circled as an avenue, as a ditch. And initially there were wooden logs. About before 3000 BC, wooden logs are there that called, when we extracted recently, we called as Aubrey holes. And these wooden logs were destroyed over time. And in exact places, the Sarsen stones were placed. And there are various phases. If we move on to the slide after another, there are various phases where first the Sarsen bluestone circle was placed, and then blue stones were removed and Sarsen circle was placed. I'm not going to the detail, but there were changes and arcs and phases. But the Amesbury man's time, after the megaliths been placed, an altar been placed called trilithians in the center. If you go to the next slide, you see the structures are slowly coming up. The Amesbury Archer's time was blue stone period, and rearranging. about 80 to 43 blue stones. And the king of Stonehenge had taken active part in structuring these blue stones. He possibly taken an leadership, an elite who took really, really good care of carrying this stone, placing in the right places. And we have evidence the Stonehenge was not the first stone circle. It was possibly these blue stones are carried from Preseli Hills in west of Wales, 240 miles away. Why we have bought from there? There are many theories. One of the theories, the first stone circle was in Preseli Hills because it's a place of extraordinary beauty and awe. It elevates the beauty in that Preseli Hills countryside in Wales. But after a while, a cultural integration was coming up and needed to be in a one sacred place. So the blue stones were brought from there, carried with logs, not through waters perhaps, but through land by people who toiled as a community together to build up the blue stone ark and the circle in a horseshoe shape around 2200 BC, around the time of the Amesbury Archer. And you know what? We also found an interesting group of people, Boscombe Bowmans, a group of families who worked in Stonehenge. Some of them are buried in Stonehenge. That beautiful craftsmanship carved the stones and lintels, shaped them with their own hands, created the circle. And those beautiful workers worked with perhaps Amesbury Archer. And there is another interesting thing. Just within a mile, 2 miles away, there is a place called Durrington Wells. Durrington is a place where earliest houses in Britain was made. This is a house, about 100 cottages were there, near Avon, near this river, where wooden fences separated the houses, and about 4,000 people lived there and lived in harmony as a community next to this river. Will pick up salmon and trout to eat, have beavers and otters and their fur to protect them from cold, have red deer's antler to rack and to use as weapons at the need an axe. Fertile lands give them food and plants. It's the same time with the mammoth sarsen stones were placed, and perhaps these Boscombe Bowmans and other workers lived in Durrington Wells. And another interesting thing, later on we called the Durrington is the place of the living, the land of living. And Stonehenge was the burial place, land of the dead. And every year there was a procession from the land of the living along the banks of the river as the flow of life to the land of the dead. And they understood the journey of life, the impermanence. They celebrated life in every minute. And they embraced death at the part of that journey. They lived well, they died well. They died well to live well. The lifespan was very short. But that procession and celebration of life as a community healed them, brought them together. And you can question why these monuments are there for. And as we know, we have many theories. We talked about burials, we talked about defensive structure as a castle of Stonehenge, but possibly not just it. We believe there are a sense of community creating rituals. The community was connected very much to nature, to each other, and created this individual burial mounds. But as a Stonehenge came not just a burial mound, a sacred place to meet, they knew that higher consciousness, individual consciousness perhaps, creates matter. They're connected to here and now, but somehow to that cosmic consciousness looking up in the sky, and created rituals to bring back harmony, coming together as a tribe in a circle. We have found Mesolithic potholes near the car park in Stonehenge nowadays. In these potholes, we have found organic matter offerings, evidences of fire in 8000 BC. As a society, they knew healing is not just physical healing. Healing comes as psychological, social, cultural, and spiritual healing. Perhaps they meant spirit more connected to harmony with nature in some very pagan way, but they're not separate. There was an oneness, and that ritual created that oneness in here, within ourselves, within community, and something bigger and higher than ourselves. And this is perhaps in our modern day we are slightly disconnected from. We have become individualistic, commodified, transactional, perhaps a bit egoistic, me world, disconnected from each other, from society. We do rituals, but in a very literal sense of the term, not to bring harmony in a world. We lost connections with nature and that sacredness the Stonehenge people did. Amesbury Archers and Boscombe Bowmans did. And in that disconnectedness comes Corona, makes us realize that today is the day of kindness epidemic, to share, to deeply connect as individuals and society together. They drummed together in moonlit night. They adored sun and the moon and the rituals. They fasted together. They danced together. And if somebody have a problem or a fever, they placed in the corner on the altar perhaps and asked question, when is the last time you played music? When was the last time you danced? When is the last time you spent time in silence? And in that community healing power, individuals connected with the collective, the bigger and the higher. And we know the higher connections and prayer and scientific evidence that community social healing is so powerful. So they have that right relationship with each other and nature. And if you take in the Vedic way, similar things perhaps happening in India in Vedic culture. Our rishis talking about madhu bhata ritayate madhu sharanti shindhabha madhu mat parthivang raja madhu nakta muto sasaha, connecting to nature as sweet rivers flowing everywhere. They talked about purnata, purnamada purnamidang purnat purnamadhuchate purnasya purnamadaya purnamevavasisyate. It is the whole. Whole is created from wholeness and fullness. You take the whole away, the whole remains. That's perhaps the circle is about. Another one, some concept I wanted to touch upon before I move on to our next place is about temple. Monuments and temples and mosques and other sacred places are very connected. A later term, temple, comes from a Latin word, templum. Templum is a sense of measure. Roman priests used to look up, and if they ask for an answer before a war, a small part of the sky, they will look at intently and contemplate. Templum means measure, contemplate is being with measure. And they will look at the constellations and find some answers on the contemplation. What is in above the order, they want to bring it below in chaos. Perhaps in Stonehenge, what is in a higher order, we want to bring that order into our lives in contemplation. A sacred precinct on the ground. All the temples, all the mosques, all the synagogues in the contemplum. Rising our eyes to the higher ground that heals, that transforms. And not only that, they merged that all sacred sites to one, bringing cultural unification from Preseli Hills to Stonehenge, various diverse communities and tribes coming together into unity. Can we do that in today's world? They believed in technology, and do not forget that this is also can be an astronomical site. Imagine this, the whole thing, the avenue is oriented towards summer solstice and setting sun and midwinter sunrise. The avenue will rise and in a circle with the midwinter setting sun. And the procession is used for the routes for the longest and the shortest day. What a fascinating astronomical beauty. I have experienced it myself. And with the global community of 5,000 people there and sun rising up, coming on through the stones, it's magic. And that is the alchemy people have experienced through time immemorial. And they have festivals. They celebrated in midsummer, midwinter, 4,000 people in 2600 BC to nowadays. It continues to Romans, to pagans, and even Romans threatened pagans. There was no short of violence. There was a graffiti on the stones, threatening pagans, and Christians is threatening pagans to kill. Saxons came. New Age people, Neo-Druids came. If you go on the slides, you will know we went to celebrate every day, every year. Then now it is closed, but perhaps we drum, we play, we dance, we chant. And we are ready to attract that abundance in life in summer and winter. As we go through the river of life, we drum, we beat together, we harmony, we come together, and that helps the power of the community. Rituals create relationships. Last but not the least, perhaps that Amesbury Archer was standing there and giving a lecture like I am doing it today over the internet, because there is an acoustic archaeology. It has been found there is a 1 centimeter difference, and this whole place can be as a lecture theater of the ringing stone, a hall effect. And it's beautiful when one person spoke inspirational speakers or motivational speakers. Perhaps they have elevated the people beyond themselves. I am greater when I'm together. And in the end, they came back into the peace. The stones hold that peace together in deep connectedness. Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jatirgamaya, mritang amritangamaya. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Direct us from darkness to light. May we move from ignorance to illumination and truth in peace, in peace, and in peace. And we move from that Stonehenge man to perhaps another extraordinary man of times of another Renaissance, 4,000 years later. A man called Michelangelo Buonarroti, born in March 1475, March 6. In 13-year-old, he went to Ghirlandaio school to learn art. But being Michelangelo, he didn't like it. Institutional thinking. He felt he's not getting attention that he deserves, and he left after a year. And he went to Florence and wandered in the garden of Lorenzo the Magnificent. And Lorenzo accepted him in his palace. He learned from people, he researched, and he saw extraordinary statues there. He learned from touching them, talking, researching, and he was named sculptor of the garden because he made 2 extraordinary statues there. However, politics changed. Rome was, and the whole Italy was gradually getting into political turmoil at the time. In 1494, he was expelled for the 2nd time, went to Bologna in mid of Italy and stayed there for an year. What was he doing? Reading poetry of Tuscan poets, Petrarch, Boccaccio, but more importantly, Dante. And his Dante Alighieri's Inferno has really influenced him. We'll come later on Last Judgment and how that Inferno coming in his art. But after a year, he went back to Rome, and a young man with great energy, passion, and ambition on one side. And on one side is a difficult man. Even Pope says, I cannot relate and be familiar with him. And from my perspective, a lot of psychiatrists and developmental psychiatrists would probably diagnose him having Asperger's syndrome or high-functioning autism. He was difficult social skills. He wanted to be alone, didn't have many friends. Some people even called him misogynistic. But that man went to Rome, really was ambitious. His banker friend Jacopo at the time said, he has come to make a change in Rome, and you know what? He will make the most beautiful statues in Rome. Imagine Rome was in classical antiquity. Imagine the statues that has been already there. And Michelangelo speaking, I'm going to make great statues. And what he did, I stood in front of that statue he made there. Two, one is Bacchus, another was Pieta. And I cried. He was just a young man. Retained the classical pyramidal style, but Florentine details been added. The Renaissance, early mid-Renaissance is coming up with humanism, with celebrating Mirandela, Pico della Mirandela, talking about centrality of man. He bringing that left hand of Pieta with divinity, holding Christ dying, and the extraordinary beauty of death and dying. And the fact is, we die every day. He celebrated the tragedy in a beautiful way that we see today. In the days of Corona, we are fearful. We are uncertain about your future, but holding death in its beauty, embracing the pain so that we do not suffer. Look at the serenity in our next slide in the Pieta's face. The calmness, the beauty that holds the death with equanimity, with peace that transforms, that heals. But you know what? Michelangelo was criticized because of that face. An excessive youthfulness in the face was against reality. All great men was criticized. But he taught us the beauty of tragedy, holding crisis as an opportunity for growth, having that growth mindset, having that post-traumatic growth, holding Christ in a lap as gently we hold death every day. And this is the message of healing. He returned to Florence in 1501 and stayed to 1505. Is more and more inspired. And this is the meeting point of two extraordinary men, the old and the young. He met Leonardo da Vinci. Imagine they're walking on Florentine roads, where Leonardo going on with his disciple, perhaps Boltraffio, talking, Master, tell me what is your art is about. Perhaps Michelangelo overhearing Boltraffio been told, Motti dell'anima, movement of the soul. Perhaps this young man 25 and this old man 50. And this old man, who is the genius of all times, is slow, taking time to finish. He's been harassed to finish the painting even. And this man is a Torun Turki. He's a flash of a genius, an overpowering, formidable energy is creating a statues that people are fascinated by. And what he created at the time, he got a marble rejected in Carrara Mountains. And there was a fault line. And that master 40 years ago rejected that marble because it cannot be used. He brought that lean and thin marble, worked on it. And we see our next picture, the extraordinary and the only one, David. And if you go back, there will be a fault line. And perhaps he wanted to say one beautiful philosophy, the Japanese called Kintsugi. Wabi-sabi. Kintsugi is a pottery technique, a technique where the broken pots, the pieces are brought together and held together by gold and silver paintings, silver linings, and brought back together. Celebrating Fisher, celebrating the imperfections of life, celebrating that we are broken and vulnerable, but we are magnificent. We are marvelous in that brokenness. We are imperfect, but we are perfect. And that is about life. And David shows that, the man of 25. And then he calls back to Rome again, Julius II, Pope 1505, to create his own tomb. Michelangelo had big plans and a kind of a Colossus statues to make, but he couldn't finish. And he went 8 months in Carrara Mountains again, but the political scenario was changing. He abandoned and left Rome. But Pope knew his caliber. He said, okay, and apologies back to Rome. And in spring of 1508, he was commissioned Sistine Chapel. Now, Sistine Chapel was built in 1473 as a Pope's place of worship. And Michelangelo wasn't sure. Even in this master has his doubts, and doubts are okay. Even that master felt, I am not a painter. Why can't you go to Raphael? I mean, the master is there already. He's a master of painting. And his biographer Condivi said, oh my God, so many times he refused. But slowly he started drawing in 1509. It got some friends from Florence to help him. And in spring of 1508, he accepted and he was excited. And he's still signing Michelangelo, the sculptor. After all, he felt my friends are not really at par with this, got rid of them, and he worked alone, worked hard for 4 years. His health started deteriorating. He was not in a very good health. And he wrote, I live here in distress, fatigued, no friends, I seek none. I do not have time to eat. I am ill. I am suffering greatly. Suddenly reminds me of Rabindranath Tagore, suffered the times and times again in death and illnesses. He wrote similar, I'm depressed, I'm suicidal. And now the magic master of Renaissance times. They're all connected. Michelangelo ate very little, lived a moderate life, sometimes only bread. Even popes thought that he needed to catch his health up. Sometimes a little salad and a little wine. He knew some of the pieces are drawn by Perugino, another master, and that has to go. And he was a bit reluctant to draw and paint over them. But he worked hard and hard and hard and finished in October 1512 with 300 figures, with 9 scenes of Genesis. If I may have the first slide of it is the sides and the vaults and the gate vaults coming up of Sistine Chapel. The last altarpiece is not created yet. It's only created after 30 years. But the vaults, an extraordinary coming from backwards, inwards, like a symphony, a synthetically grandiose as we advance towards the altar, almost like a symphonic music developing. And a gigantic figures of sea bowl and prophets. If we could see some of the pictures coming up. We see some of the nude and youthful figures as well. If we move some of this picture, and this one is particularly very important, of creation myth and the myth of Adam and fall of, I'll come to that in a second. If we move through some of the pictures that we see on the altars as gigantic prophets, various figures are coming up. But then is a picture of prophet, which I wanted to show you. Yes, if we move on from there, more and more pictures. And this is Ezekiel. Moving on. Yes, And this is the picture of the creator with formidable energy. And the energy is Michelangelo's energy. And creation is his human, his son, Adam. And if you see the next, the temptation, and we just said the fall of, if you stay there for a second, the temptation and fall of Adam in the earlier picture. If we stay in this picture, please. No. So that we saw the temptation of fall of Adam and Eve, is a art historian said this is the peak achievement of a fresco painter. If we go back to this one, as you see the creator and human, the hands touching, but perhaps not. Perhaps there are pause between the music. Perfection is God. And we are part of that human divine spirit. Having deep intimacy with our divine self is our journey. As Tennyson says, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. We are striving towards that perfection, a sense of becoming. Even in Eliot's fourth quartet, I said to my soul, be still and wait. Wait without hope. Hope is not in future. Hope is right here, right now. Creating a sense of belonging together, a courage to be still. And you see, Michelangelo created many pauses, many spaces in between their figures up and down. In order to arrive at what you do not know, you must go by a way which is the way of the ignorance. Ignorance is unknown. The fear of the unknown for today. In India today, COVID is ravaging. In UK, we are coming out in light with more hope and courage. But the courage to be still and holding the space of fear with greater equanimity and peace. Not get sucked into thoughts of future or the past, but right here is the courage to be still. In order to arrive at we do not know, which is the way of the ignorance. Ignorance is scary. But if I have an attitude towards that openness of experience, of scare, difficulties, temptations, trials, tribulations, if we hold that, Michelangelo is perhaps saying, we cultivate a sense of meaning to be alive today and be grateful. In that gratitude, we live that we are alive today. We are able to talk and listen. And cultivate the aliveness creates meaning, which heals. Meaning flows in our lives. And Michelangelo was that visionary spirituality. If you see all those figures, and I'll come to the central altarpiece in a second, have a physical body movements, and Michelangelo's grandiose symphonic physical movements are grounded in the body because he was an anatomist. He dissected bodies, and he knew through our body we experience grace, we experience godliness. The door, he writes in poetry, the door opens to the grace as we ascend without grace in thought in vain. I'm come to the central figure, not yet. But what he did with that physical movement and another part going beyond in sublime and have that bridge. Right here is the physical language of expression and dance, manifest world. And right up there in unmanifest, Purusha, Prakriti, the sense of Tantra, the duality but non-duality, physical, manifest, and sublime. And that is all. If you see in Stonehenge, is sitting there and you have a reverential fear. You revere this work going in the hallway in Sistine Chapel. You are simply transcend. In Latin, perhaps they say, mysterious, tremendous at fascinance. It's tremendous mystery, but fascinating, something beyond ourselves. It makes us somehow fearful. Our ego dissolves and transcends. And that's poetry. that spirituality, that hill, something's bigger than ourselves, in very Whitmanian way, perhaps. Perhaps I did not know I am greater than, bigger than ourselves as a community, as individuals. And then 30 years later, then comes a political turmoil and altarpiece wasn't finished. Here, Italy is sickened by war. Similar to, we have wars all throughout First and Second World War. And at the time of Italy has inequality, troops from Germany, France, Spain, and everywhere is coming, and people are really terrified. And Rome was sacked in 1527 again. Old Republic came back. Michelangelo had to hide in the Tower of Niccolo in Florence, and Pope Clement become paranoid. He become paranoid to come out because police was really searching all night, all day for him. In the end, Pope changed. Pope Clement was pardoned him because the Pope knew Last Judgment was there in Padua, Pisa, San Marco, everywhere, but Michelangelo can do something extraordinary. And the society needed healing. Society needed to come back together. Like after the wars, like after the Trump regime, like after Corona, we need healing as a society. And needed Michelangelo to be harbinger, an angel of that reparation. He was called to Rome by next Pope Paul III, who valued him. In April 1535, a largest ever fresco was commissioned. And he had the biblical vision. How can I make that altar so extraordinary that transcends time? But he talks about something temporal. Talks about death and dying, but resurrection and reparation coming together. His vision of all things temporal, but within that temporality, how can we transcend beyond time? How can we connect the dots of time and space? He got friend Sebastiano again, who actually needed to do a plaster, but he was doing his own thing, his oils, he messing it up. Michelangelo had enough, got rid of him, and again gone on solo for 6 years. Waking up at sunrise, and remember, this is a 60-year-old man. Waking up every sunrise, having a hat of cardboard, having a lamp in here, and looking up and drawing pictures. And he says, neither pen nor scout quieten me anymore. The soul turned into divine love. And he's influenced by Dante's Inferno, and he's another Latin poem from 1260, and he made scenes of that Last Judgment. And the focal point, if I see the next slide, was Christ. And it is an extraordinary Christ we never seen before. The Christ without a beard. The Christ face is half lit. The Christ is in motion, standing up. And Christ is youthful like Apollo. And even just beside him, his mother, Virgin Mary, somehow shrunk, frightened perhaps. It's intriguing. And then beside that, outside in the walls, down in left to both sides, there was chaotic mass. If we see the pictures in lower left, there's sinners, death, stupefied. People are dying, stuck in the mud, in the rot. And in the right-hand side, even there are snake, Minos, been kind of there in the right extreme left. There is a story of Minos. He made Biagio, who made a lot of problem for him as Minos, his face. But the fairy Charion from Dante coming up to actually sail through, taking all the sinners. Some people, next slide please, some people will pull up by rosary beads, resurrected and pulled up by people. This is death. and dying, which is really today. We see death everywhere. We die every day. But we are resurrected as well by transforming our fears today, transforming our fears of corona times, taking protections, building up on science, but at the same time resurrected by our inner transformation to be right here, right now, fully present with death and dying, so that we are alive and grateful. In high up corners, we say trumpeting and angels. If we go on, move on to the next slides. In raising the dead, that St. Matthew's and Gospels and Corinthians, St. Paul says that in the last judgment day, next slides, that people will rise from the dead, and rising more, not just dead and reborn. Resurrection for Michelangelo was what Christ said, anastasis. Christ has risen, St. Luke's. Christ has risen, is twice born. If you see in John's Gospel, the dialogue between a Rabbi Nicodemus and Jesus, he talks about being twice born, dying to oneself, one egoistic self, opening up to celebrations and community and oneness, and being born again. Dijo, that is Brahman, born twice. And that is healing. And then one interesting thing, if we go there, that is, he's surrounded by apostles, St. Bartholomew, St. Peter's, and St. Catherine's. But St. Bartholomew has in his hand a skin. And hanging skin, you will see Michelangelo's own face, deep-setted eyes with broken nose from an injury. And it's beautifully not only just painted. He says at the time that I am depressed. And what happened, Pope Paul II came twice to see, and Michelangelo did not want them to see anything before he finished. He was very, very protective. What he did, he just one day in anger, he fell from the scaffolding. He had a serious injury on his leg. He ran to his home and shut his doors and would not come out. He would not see any doctors. It was bizarre. For months, he had to stay on his own. He was depressed, distressed. He has a physician friend who came in to help. And everybody was worried what's going to happen to all of this. But he came up. Then in 1541, by the way, another interesting thing happened. The ceremony, the Biagio, who was the master of ceremony, he came in to see, and he was shocked by the nudities around. And he kind of said, oh my God, this is debauchery rather than a Pope's palace. And he complained to the Pope that so many nudes. And even one of the humanistic philosophers, Artino, in Venetian circle said, this picture's better in the bath than in the chapel. And the Pope said, you know what? I have no territory in hell, so let it be. So Biagio, forgive it. I can only see God in this. So 1541, finished finally. It was supposed to be opened up in Christmas Day, but Pope was hurrying. And on All Saints' Day, in 31st of October, it was revealed. And great praise. People was outstanding, in awe in the right way of the term. Michelangelo says, I am a poor man with little merit, who plods along in the art. God gave me to lengthen my life as far as possible. Vasari said, Michelangelo restored the light of the world. Because like Stonehenge, he was the new spirit of freedom, community, coming together, celebrating. But great criticism came, not only just by nudity, but later on, Paul IV has to drape this by one of his students, Volterra, in later on, which called Corrections of Daniel. Imagine somebody painting drapes on Michelangelo's nude pictures, but it contained nothing but spirit. and an inquisition came up in 1573, where he was accused of reformist movement because he was a stern ascetic spirituality of Christian flavor, although he was humanistic in ideal in spirit, because he was deeply human, but also deeply spiritual. And he knew that spirituality is not by faith alone. Faith is a courageous trust to living, but at the same time, you need grace, you need to work. And he was criticized by that and been looked upon. However, Michelangelo lived, and living forever. Our recent restoration took even 10 years of this master. And as we look into both these spaces of monuments, of reverence, sacredness, journeys, transformation, healing, and awe, and celebration, and community, we see we're coming back together as humanity as a whole. We are learning how to heal, be whole again, create meaning in our lives, and be in peace. Thank you. I hope I am in time and space.
Absolutely, Amita. Thank you so much for that enlightening talk. It is always lovely to hear you. Before I can see Seema as well, and she's smiling. Before I move on to mine or Seema's reflection, because we have an audience here and listeners.
Thank God for that.
So I would like to ask from some of you, if you have any reflection to share, or if you have any question for Amita.
This is Michelangelo's pause, is it?
This is the pregnant pause, perhaps.
It's good.
I think the way you have connected, the past and the present, and so many layers to it, how much time did you spend actually, putting it all together, and the kind of clarity you have, it's mind-boggling. So I'm sure people are also thinking about that right now and reflecting on it.
Shubhamoy asked an interesting question. Who is today's Michelangelo? Perhaps I can answer that. I mean, it's a not only interesting question, it is a reflective one. I believe Michelangelo is in everyone. If we look at the spirit, if you look at the right and left brain that Leonardo or Michelangelo had, he had clarity, he has skill, he has his technique. As Leonardo has fumato, Michelangelo had this Raphael sweetness and imbibed that gentleness from Leonardo and created his own. This is left brain stuff. If I talk about a neuroscientific point of view, the bridge between the right and the left, the spirit and the skill, the analytic, the social dimension, he brings up from political turmoil to create something extraordinary, to heal, to transform. We all have that inner power. Our creativity is not about an attitude. It's not about an aptitude. It's an attitude. It's an attitude of self-expression, to be open, to be free like a little child. Unless you are a little child, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. And if we go back to our own little Michelangelo, it is always within all of us, of that spirit, of that freedom, bringing it together and bringing it out. We can all be our Michelangelos. We can have our own Stonehenge. I have a little stone circle in my garden. You all might have a little sacred spaces. Michelangelo's sacred space was inside and he brought it out. Educarte, that is his education, bringing it out. You can bring it out any spaces, make it sacred. There is no difference between sacred and secular. So we are all today's Michelangelo Shubhamoy. Thank you for being with us.
Shirobrata Majumdar has said the way you have connected the mystery of Stonehenge with Renaissance of Sistine Chapel, it is just reflection of our own transformation.
Absolutely.
Shumana has said you are one natural and inspiring storyteller, Amita.
Oh,
Why has this to end?
storyteller. We only all tell our stories. Narrative is everything connects us together. Thank you, Shumona.
You can see comments pouring in through the chat box. Onisha has a question. Onisha Banerjee has asked, can art connect us even today, all of us, beyond economic segregations?
Interesting question, and it goes back, it probably will take an hour to answer this. But what is art? I don't want to be a psychotherapist to ask you a question back on Nesha, but it's an important question. What is art? For me, everything is art. Art is not something happens on a canvas or a sculpture. The little flower we tend and look at with gentleness and mindfulness, the little pottery we do in our lives, or the way we nurture our children, it's art. Art is something that we not just create, but we connect. Art is something that we create a sense of belonging to. In that way, everything around us can be artistic, depending upon our self-expression. The extraordinary development of imaginative sensibilities. When we connect, we have that yes to belonging. Yes, some people perhaps a little bit more gifted, like Mozart. Like early, he started playing piano at 4, but he was genius because he also worked hard. He called the 10 years rule. He created the first major proper work, not at age 4, but 25 after 15 years of playing. Look at Michelangelo. Look at everybody have that 10 years rule. We need to prepare. We need to hard work. Some talent helps, but art is something we can create. Art is something every day. It's mundane. It's ordinary becomes extraordinary. And it is in that word, in economic day-to-day basis. Yes, it's not that we all create art to sell, but art is possibly is satisfied in itself. It's not an ends to a mean something. It is what it is right here in front of us, is creating a little thing in my sacred place. It's not transactional, but relational. We create a relationship that we belong to something, belong outside and in. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Amita. And Anita Ranjit has said the way we bring up children is art. Wow,
Yeah.
never thought of it that way.
Yes, you are parents. There are no perfect parents. There are only good enough parents. We bring up, this is from my child psychology hat, is we bring up parents, children with love, care, affection, giving developmental stimulation. We nurture, we have that compassionate algorithm within us. We set boundaries. We give positive reinforcement. We create, say, stop. All of that is a parenting art. We are not brought up with parenting skills. It's like driving skills we learn. But what you have within you is love. And you create that sense of belonging to your children, but given unconditional love and sense of belonging. And that's art. That's in you, not an object, a creation of art. Of course, parenting is an art.
Do our listeners have any questions or any reflections for Dr. Biswas? Okay, Amita, I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah. So when you were speaking of, Michelangelo and the way he has drawn the, like, not only about him, but the nude pictures that you were speaking about, and then say there were draping that was done. We also see this happening across India, and
Yeah.
So when we talk about art and art getting seen through another perspective, seen through another lens, and because in every monument, when we are talking about memoirs of monuments, we in every monument, it's nothing but arts, right? It's nothing but arts and it's nothing but science. It's a combination of both. Every angle that you look at, it's science. If the way the angle has been designed and the way something has been drawn there is arts. So no monument can exist without these both. But when we talk about censoring arts in monuments, what is your view on that? And once again, when things sometimes reverse, so on the nude picture, some draping has been done, and then somewhere somebody else has a new vision, and for damage control, once again, that will be taken off. But that picture never comes back to the original one, right? So how this journey goes on, and what is our what is our responsibility as custodians of heritage, arts, and this monuments?
I'm not sure we are custodians, but okay, there are various perspectives here. Let's think about, this is not something happening recently. Time immemorial, we have destroyed monuments and structure. You have seen Assyrians, even then in recent times in Nineveh and all these things, 4,000-year-old statues have been destroyed and been draped by Byzantiums. It's happened all the time. So what it is, we have to see how we think. Now, here comes a question of, especially if Michelangelo, question of religion. And I talked about spirit. There is not difference. Religion as it comes across as a mystical perspective from time immemorial, as an experience that gives us meaning and sense of aliveness, something is belong. When religiosity or thinking becomes concretized, which becomes narrow and dogmatic, and in a sense that is disconnected from mystical experience, what happens? Our thinking becomes cemented. Brother David Steindl-Rast told me once, Amit, either you take scripture seriously or literally. I take it seriously. So seriously means, if you go back to the religion word, it comes from Latin religio, tying the knots. It's not about separation. So what separates is our thinking rather than feeling, absorbing the grace and the experience. So what we think, that this is not right, this is not, it comes from power politics, comes from hierarchical structures, from impositions. So what happens, what we think is right is the right, rather than openness of celebration. When that openness comes cross down, when we do not connect anymore, we disconnect, take things literally, and our view becomes the predominant view. Diversity, the dialogues, the debates that we stop when we have a narrow religious, dogmatic, not just religious, one-sided, monophonic, hierarchical, perhaps scientific, reductionist, materialistic thinking, we cut off from the reality what is. We don't connect. That's why Inquisition came up and said, the pictures are bare, nude, but it's a raw spirit. When we have sensuality, do we have sex? Do we have just genital knee-jerk? Or is it an extraordinary moment of connectedness? Our dance is bare. We are born naked, we die naked. That innate nakedness has that divinity. When we are not in that diverse space of religious thinking, we do not tie the knots together, we break. And when we break, we disconnect. When we disconnect, we destroy. This is what's happening. So what we need is not to tell them to stop this. What we need, this conversation to shift of consciousness, to go back to basics, to tie the knots again, and understand what religion really is, what thinking really is, what is beyond dogmatism, reductionism, materialism. And this is happening. A new shift of consciousness. We are moving from Homo sapiens even to Homo luminous. We cannot create transformation in the society before we create a transformation within ourselves. So our job is to keep ourselves open and create dialogues. I hope it gives you a very roundabout answer.
Absolutely, Amit. Thank you so much. That brings me to another question, because perhaps we have some time, and if any listener has any question, I would shut up. But otherwise, I remember that, Michelangelo, he began his work on the frescoes for perhaps for Pope Julius II. And he replaced the blue ceiling dotted with stars. So once again, another replacement was done. What we see, that is another replacement in a way, because originally the Pope asked Michelangelo to paint the ceiling with some geometric ornament and place the 12 apostles in spandrels around the decoration. But he proposed instead to paint the Old Testament scenes now, which are found on the wall. So this brings me to the question that whatever monuments that we see have gone through a lot of transformation, as we were right now saying. But whatever was created, either it is by the artist or who has been commissioned by the monument maker, either the monarch or maybe the religious leader, or it is the vision of the monument maker that actually was entirely carried out by the artist, or somewhere there is an interweaving and things come in between. What would be your view on the spatial politics that gets affected by these two, the artist whose work we are seeing, or the vision of the monument maker whose vision was carried out? Because the spatial politics, what was there in the past is just not the past. Somewhere it affects the present and the future.
Well, I will, if you ask my personal opinion, I will say a personal story of why can't I make films given by the money from the producers want to do a love story or something, because I have a different vision. And if the producer or the financier do not understand my vision, it's very hard to collaborate. And I'm not Michelangelo in that sense, that I will not only create a dialogue, I have that formidable energy. And that's why he painted some of the apostles in a very rebellious way. His spirit, he just moves and fiery, even the creation with the energy that he shown that I will do something people will not be able to take out from that ceiling. The fact is, it's a balance. Sometimes we have to survive and live and eat. And Michelangelo, Leonardo, everybody done that. Look for their patrons, look for the commissions. But for this one, he knew this is going to be special. I'm not going to just have another Padua or another San Marco. I have seen extraordinary pictures by Titian to everybody. But Michelangelo knew, not only I will draw and paint a Pope's chapel, I will bring something so extraordinary which creates time and space, but a vision of an artist. His passion will flow through the walls like a symphony. And he will say something energizing about that space, about healing, about transformation. It's not about defiance. I will show something and do something and make a mark that people will understand in time. Great painters, philosophers are judged a lot of time later. Some people are not understood. So it's a balance. I understood things changed. Yes, there are, I mean, that's why popes changed. Pope Julius wanted his tomb and he kind of created something and changed later on. It took years and years. He died. But some of the Pope knew his caliber, knew some of the freedom you have to give to the artist to make a mark and see what's going on. And Michelangelo, that's why I didn't like them to come in. He wanted to wait to see and reveal. And Pope came in actually later in the night to peep, and he was freaked out. Otherwise, you remember the Biagio's complaint. He would say like, look, just take it out. He painted Biagio at Minos, draped by the snake, like the worst place in the hell. And he said he was so angry, and Pope tolerated it. So if we create an extraordinary masterpiece, I deeply believe, I am a filmmaker, my job is to leave it there. It's the posterity to judge. People will be moved, and my only thing is motti dell'anima, movement of the soul. I stood in front of Madonna Lita in an exhibition in Royal Academy here. My body was going down into bow, and I cried because it's moved. So it is not about just the stars and when it is commissioned. Michelangelo is a caliber of the artist. He knew I have a vision to create. It's not about art. It's about transcending art to a place it will move the soul. And that's the great art is about. And I think that's the balance.
Sir, if I may, thank you for the previous answer. Thank you so much. What is it about Madonna Lita that affected you the most? I have looked at the painting once in my life. I could not decipher it, much of it. Can you please help me there?
I don't know. Some things will touch you. A little dew drop on the sunshine on the blade of the grass will make you cry. I really don't know what touch. I stay with openness. I saw in almond blossoms, I saw so many, fan of Van Gogh, and I saw so many paintings. But when I in Amsterdam, I saw that almond blossoms. It just came out of the screen and touched me. And that was just the moment of awe. And just creating an awe in everyday life, in your child's, in your cats, in your food, in the little moments of awe brings that happiness and joy. And we can celebrate that. So your awe and my awe could be different. My awe could be a little crystal ball coming up and holding in front of my eyes and how the sunshine and give me that happiness. Recreating that flow and the joy is very deeply subjective and personal. Perhaps you can hold this beautiful shell and it shines. It might be a joy, and it is my joy today. So it's very deeply personal. I can't explain.
So it was just a moment's experience. It was nothing that you had studied or experienced before that. It was momentous.
Okay. It's nothing to do with studies. You are talking about your left brain, your understanding, your research and marination. And I'm talking about not about thought. I'm about thoughtlessness. When you stand in front of an object, say a flower, and you suspend your thought, you are being in the present moment, right here, right now. Thought disappears. You are being with experience with oneness. You're one with the object, be it a sunrise. If you say a sunrise is beautiful, you're gone in the thought moment, you lose the moment. For you to be one with the object, need that openness, where you stay fully present. When you are fully present, you are one with experience without thought. That's the moment of beauty, extraordinarity, and the place of now. Now is not in time. Now is eternal. When we calculate the moment of eternity right here, right now, every moment is an eternal moment.
True.
And it
Very
comes
true.
to practice.
Yes, it does. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Amita.
Thank you.
Okay. Seema, would you like to share a reflection? Because I'm really dying to hear from you.
No, I have actually been reflecting because I feel that Dr. Amit Biswas has actually opened a new way of thinking for me, the way he has made connections. And I'm still in awe of what he has said. I was just thinking that I will need to listen to this again. And I'm glad it's on YouTube because I will listen and soak in, and that would be actually doing justice to it. And maybe not just once, listen to it again and again, 2-3 times, to really, let the entire experience of what you have connected together, put together so beautifully, to be imbibed by me.
And I hope people can listen to it, our dialogues. I mean, some of these things are prepared, some of them not. But I'm deeply grateful to have this space. And this is a new for me to connect with monuments. We talk about every day with our so-called patients and other talks and scientific talks. So thank you for the opportunity.
And I'm also quite, I've been smiling when he said that there's Michelangelo inside all of us, and it's that little child. And that's so beautiful. So thank you for reminding us of that, the inner child, the inner being.
And we have to bring that inner child out, not cultivate it, already there. We condition ourselves to lose that childhood.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Biswas.
Stay well, stay safe. Follow
Thank
science,
you, Amita.
follow Michelangelo as well.
And thank you so much for your time, Amita, for being here with Storytelling Education and Arts India Council, speaking at Memoirs of Monuments, Hamari Kahani, Hamari Dharohar. And I just remembered what Mehmet Murat Ildan has said. Ancient monuments are full of wisdom, for they have been filled with what they have seen and heard for hundreds of years. And for some of them, like Stonehenge, it's thousands of years. So thank you so much, Dr. Biswas, for making us once again, you reminded us that heritage can also be so healing. And thank you for moving our soul. Thank you so much.
Take care all.
Thank you